All right, I have 3 o'clock Eastern. Welcome everyone. My colleague Sarah is going to help me out with a poll to get everybody participating right off the bat today. So Sarah, if you don't mind, or pull up, there it is. Probably surprising to some of you. What is your favorite form of potato? We're not going to give you all day to answer this, of course. It's not that difficult, but we are interested in the answers. What is your favorite form of potato? We'll give it another 10 seconds, 15 seconds, and then we'll get you the answers. Shocker. Looks like we've got French fries in the lead and will probably remain that way for eternity, I would say. All right, that was fun. Thanks for helping out with that poll, Sarah. We've got about 1 after, probably rolling into 2 after the hour. So we're gonna go ahead and get started. We'll get to some additional introductions very soon too, but first a genuine thanks to everyone for joining today's webinar, The Evolution of Synthetic Turf Fields, how you can move from a traditional design to a safer, high performance system. This is actually an Encore presentation. So we gave this webinar early in the year before all the chaos hit us. We had a ton of attendees that time around as well. So we thought, we would give it another chance and give exposure to those that weren't able to join us earlier in the year. A few housekeeping items. I apologize. I did not get around to putting on my makeup, but I did get dressed. So that's a good thing. I didn't make that a video conference blunder, thankfully. We've got about 1 hour today, plus or minus. You'll probably notice a chat function at the bottom of your screen. That's actually going to be disabled today. So make sure you submit all of your questions through that Q&A window or Q&A function. And we will absolutely get your answers later today. If we don't have them today, we'll circle back around with you and get the level of detail you need later on. All right, well, today we'll be talking through this notion of traditional versus modern, or sometimes referred to as progressive systems. And to help us do that, I've got a couple other presenters and colleagues with me today. We will obviously be introducing ourselves on video, and then to just minimize any distractions throughout the main portion of today's presentation, we'll go off video to give you the best visuals possible. But again, I mentioned my name is Brad Borgman, Director of Sales with USGreentech. Alongside me, I've got Bo Shipley. Wave to everyone, Bo. Bo is our regional manager for the southeast part of the country, based in the beautiful mountainous region of Tennessee, Knoxville to be specific. And then moving to the opposite coast, Kimberly Williams. Say hi, Kimberly. Kim is based in Los Angeles, covers the northwest region part of the country. Both Bo and Kim have been with us for several years, so very high level of experience, but more importantly, support for everyone out there. All right, we're going to go off camera and get started with the meat and potatoes, no pun intended. So what are we going to be covering today? So we're going to talk first about this notion or the evolution of synthetic turf systems. We're going to really dive into the importance of infill and how it impacts the overall field. Of course, we'll take a deep dive on our 2 products, Safeshell and Envirofill. And we'll do this by, excuse me, taking you around the country, kind of through a tour around the country to see how many of these fields are performing over time, giving you some real life data. As we know, especially for those of you that have designed a field before, performance testing is extremely important. So we'll talk specifics about performance testing as well. And then finally, like I mentioned, we'll wrap it up with some questions. But first, for those that might not be as familiar with USGreentech, we've been developing progressive infill products for over 10 years now, really trying to help advance the industry forward in a responsible way as it relates to not only our environmental impacts, but along with the safety and the performance of the athletes using the fields that we're a part of and that we help create. We're also an employee-owned company. This mentality, along with our mission of creating better turf systems together, fosters a level of thought partnership And I think collaboration with those that we work with, which we're extremely passionate about. So moving on to our first topic of the day, we wanted to define what we mean by a traditional turf system. As you can see on the slide, this would be a kind of a sand and rubber infilled mixed system. This came into play about at least 2 decades ago. You generally will see a much taller pile, 2¼ to 2½ inch pile height. This requires more infill. And as you also notice, there's generally, or traditionally, there was not a shock pad used in these types of systems years ago. In these cases, infill is being asked to do a lot. It's being asked to provide performance, longevity, and also safety on the field. I would say maybe one redeeming quality of this system is that it is the least expensive way to build a field for the most part. Really, unless pristinely maintained, it's very, very difficult to maintain high performance and safety with this type of design. One major downfall is the hardness that starts to occur on the field over time due to infill compaction, UV degradation of the infill, and so on. So with no shock pad, it's difficult to maintain acceptable impact tolerances, that you may have experienced and even tested with on day one of the installation. A high percentage of these fields are really still being designed in this way, believe it or not. But while state of the art during the early years, I really think it's safe to say at this point our industry is starting to advance into newer technologies. So counter to what we just defined, this is an example of what we would consider a modern or progressive field design. With the incorporation of a shock attenuation pad over the base layer, you're able to lower the pile height and/or add additional fiber material in the form of a thatch. This will also help stabilize the infill, which you can now use less of because the shock attenuation pad is kind of your safety layer, allowing the infill and the turf to be your performance layer. So now you can lower the pile height to say 1½ to 2 inches maximum. You can reduce the amount of infill to around 5 to 8 pounds on average versus 8 to 10, 8 to 11 pounds per square foot. And many of these progressive infills are being designed specifically for use in synthetic turf systems versus a waste stream product that is temporarily diverted from the landfill use or for use in turf. So definitely keep that in mind as it relates to the sustainability of these systems. To expound a bit on the importance of infill, we are sharing this testing chart, which is from Labosport, a really well-respected international testing agency. This visual represents how much influence each primary component of the system can have on various safety and performance metrics, which you can kind of see there in the first 2 left-hand columns. And as you'll notice by the X's in each of the rows, the performance infill layer impacts each and every one of these metrics. No other component has that much influence, as you can see there on the chart. So it goes without saying, please consider selecting your infill first, and then designing your system around that. What type of pad, what type of turf you really want for your client. So for the next few minutes, I'll introduce our 2 progressive infill products, starting with our 100% natural Safeshell. But first, I think it's helpful to also comment on the evolution of natural, or sometimes referred to as organic infills. USGreentech holds a lot of appreciation for innovation and those that are innovating. And so we have always had an appreciation for what organic infills have intended to offer our industry and of course, our clients. For example, natural infills can be the best way to cool surface temperatures, big topic, of course, this day and age. They can offer a natural feel underfoot and should be environmentally responsible. So like many of you, we have been monitoring the performance and the merit of these infills since they've been gaining in popularity the last few years. We've made several observations that the benefits of organic infills 1.0, if you will, come with significant trade-offs, or can come with significant trade-offs, some of which you see listed here on the screen. So floating away can be an issue, heavy migration, under heavy play, or just due to weather conditions. This can lead to excessive top-off, so an increased cost of ownership, certain products drying out over time, they're moisturized or they're saturated, you can lose optimal performance, unless you have a laser focus on that maintenance program. So the image that you're looking at there on the left-hand side, that's an example of a real-life field. I think this was down in Florida. That was infilled with an organic product, a lighter weight organic material. A couple of years later, we were actually on that field, took some photos, and as you can see, about all that's left over is the ballast layer, the sand, the round sand product. So again, just an example of kind of some real life issues with natural materials. So you gotta be aware of what you're actually getting. So after a lot of these observations, at least 3 to 4 years, we really felt we could address some of the shortcomings that we just discussed. So therefore, we went to work and we developed Safeshell. Safeshell is a 100% natural product. It's a proprietary blend of black and English walnut shells. We chose this product for many reasons, but one, it's naturally occurring, and it is a renewable resource. It's grown here in the United States. No trees are cut down or need to be replanted for harvesting. It's extremely durable. So walnut shells are one of the most dense shells in the world. This leads to lower maintenance, higher durability, which you'll hear more about later. And it has one of the, it's actually, the bulk density is almost 3 times that of most organic materials or natural materials on the market. So the importance of this will also be touched on later. But this results in the product being the lowest maintenance organic infill on the market. Safeshell is also a USDA certified bio-based infill. It contains 100% bio-based content. This also means it's on the federal government registry of approved or preferred products. So if you're designing this for a government project, for example, you will get preferential treatment since Safeshell is on that registry or on that menu, if you will, of products. So here we show the complete life cycle of Safeshell from farm to field, we like to say, starting with the harvest for our processing facilities, where we also take it through a chemical-free process to remove all residual protein from the shell itself, which makes it an allergen-free product. And then out to project sites all around the country. Finally, after the life of the field, the shells are biodegradable and can be returned to the earth. Just a quick note, and again, you'll hear more about this later, but this is a food grade product. So the FDA standard is 20 parts per million or less, and you have a gluten-free or an allergen-free product. Safeshell tests below 2.4 parts per million, which is essentially non-detectable. So on this side, you can see how the recommended Safeshell system comes together with the incorporation of the shock pad and, of course, the turf. And just quickly, we recommend Safeshells installed in a 1 3/4 to 2 inch dual fiber, so slip film monofilament combination turf product at a rate of 1.5 pounds of Safeshell per square foot over a clean round sand ballast layer. There are some really high-performing, economical shock pads on the market that pair really well with Safeshell. In this system, we have paired it with Schmidt's ProPlay product. This will hands down be one of, if not the most economical, in addition to the highest performing natural progressive fields on the market. Now, I know you're gonna have a ton of questions, hopefully around Safeshell. Again, we'll get to those later. Submit those through the Q&A box. Secondly is our flagship product, Envirofill. Envirofill has been used in well over 200 fields and thousands of other residential and commercial projects throughout the US for, as I mentioned earlier, well over a decade at this point. As you'll hear shortly, Envirofill is often chosen for its durability, consistency, and low maintenance. It is an acrylic-coated, highly round sand, which is also infused with 24/7 microban antimicrobial protection. which will help fight against most common bacteria strands, mold, and mildew, keeping your field cleaner over time. Another major benefit is that Envirofill can be installed homogenously. So this is really great, especially for the installer or the contractor. No other ballast layer is needed. So you use 100% Envirofill, no other sand or various other products, really streamlining the overall installation process and helping to reduce maintenance and cost of ownership over time. Along with the product's 16-year warranty, this is also a major reason why Envirofill can be reused for a second life cycle, and you'll hear more about that proof of concept as well. So just wanted to touch on Microban briefly before handing it over to Bo. Microban is the worldwide leader in antimicrobial solutions. USGreentech has had an exclusive partnership with Microban for several years now for the use in Infill products. And as mentioned earlier, Microban is infused into the coating of our product, giving you full-time protection against bacteria, mold, and mildew. So this is not uncommon. You know, many schools, municipalities, and other agencies will also use this type of product to protect surfaces around their campus, surfaces such as countertops, door handles, and the like. Just one more benefit that Envirofill can offer your field as well. And as you can see, many major corporations such as Under Armour also trust this technology in their products. So now I'm going to hand it over to Bo. Bo will start our tour around the country.
Thank you, Brad. Again, my name is Bo Shipley. I'm the Southeast Regional Manager for USGreentech. And now it's time to put on your seatbelts because I'm about to take you on a ride around the country for a virtual field tour. Brad just spoke to you about the benefits and properties of Safeshell and Envirofill. And now we are going to take you to 9 stops across the country to showcase our fields and the infill solutions we provide. We will touch on the issues that the field owners were having and how they chose our infill to meet those challenges. So the first fields we're going to look at are up in Massachusetts. We have 2 fields that were built in 2015 and 2016 at Ipswich and Newburyport High School. Now we are showcasing these because we were able to go out and get testing results from these installs. And we want you to know when you put this system in, you should expect that field to stay tight and consistent over the life of the field. So here is a picture of those 2 fields. On the next slide is a chart that goes over the testing results we got from these fields. And I'm going to take some time to explain this chart to you because we are going to see these results, I believe, 3 more times during our presentation. So first on your left, you're going to see the schools listed and the years their fields were installed. And then next to that, the testing that was actually administered. So the GMEX, which most of you are familiar with, is going to be that flat cylinder missile that drops to the surface. And that's going to be more indicative of a body hitting the ground. And as we continue to talk about evolution of turf systems, there's also been an evolution in testing. That's where we come to critical fall height. And critical fall height is actually measured in meters, and it is the height in which a spherical missile that more closely resembles the shape of a head is dropped from a height until it reaches a Hicks score that is greater than 1,000. Your rotational resistance is the relationship between turf and cleats when an athlete cuts or turns. So how grippy or loose that field feels. The higher the rotational resistance, the grippier it is, and the lower the score, the looser it's going to be. Next, we have force reduction. Force reduction is going to be the amount of energy that actually gets lost down into the turf field. So when an athlete is running on that field, how much of their energy are they really losing when they impact that surface? And then opposite of force reduction is energy restitution. So how much of that energy gets kicked back up into the athlete's body? Both of these performance metrics affect player fatigue and lower leg injuries. And then finally, we've got vertical deformation. Vertical deformation is measured in millimeters, and every time an athlete's cleat interacts with this surface, how much does that surface deform or go down? So the reason we are highlighting these for you here is so you can see that the testing on these 2 fields are well within these FIFA ranges. And I also wanted to take a moment to talk to you about these FIFA ranges because not one governing body covers all of these tests. The FIFA ranges were actually established from a study where they asked European soccer players their top 25 favorite natural grass fields to play on. So that's what we were trying to do here, is mimic a natural grass system. Then they went out and tested those fields, and that's where they came up with these ranges. So just please keep in mind that these are performance preferences and not safety measures. As you can see, after 4 or 5 years of these fields being installed, they are still performing very well. And the reason for that is because of the roundness of Envirofill, which essentially prevents it from compacting. As you know, the crumb rubber and subangular sand that is typically used in many turf systems can compact over time and make that field much more firm. Now we're going to head straight down I-95 into the Big Apple, New York City. New York City has been a long-standing customer using Envirofill. They have actually used Envirofill in over 25 of their sports fields, and they chose Envirofill because they literally play on these fields 24/7. So just like the city that never sleeps, these fields never sleep either. They chose Envirofill because of that bulk density. Envirofill has a bulk density that is over 2 times that of crumb rubber and sand. So you're not getting that fly out or that rooster tail in migration of infill. So once you install the Envirofill, you know it is there and it is there to stay. New York City Parks and Recs just got a maintenance program about 2 years ago. So up until that point, they were putting these fields in and then having to let them be. They could not do anything to maintain them. So they chose the most durable infill that they could find to protect those turf fibers and make sure that they hold up to the extreme number of hours that these fields will be under duress. Our next stop is down in Brooklyn. You can see these are absolutely beautiful installations. What you can't see in this picture of these 3 full-size soccer fields out on the pier is that you're actually looking right into Manhattan on the other side. It's quite the view. This is a very unique application where these fields were put in using a different infill. It was another natural organic infill, and after the first year, all of it had blown off into the East River. So they refilled it, and the same thing happened in year 2. At that point, they had lost all of their performance infill. So they came to USGreentech, knowing all the work we had done with New York City Parks and Recs, and said, hey, what can you guys do to help us with these fields? So what we did is we did a test plot using Envirofill and a test plot using Safeshell. Since they had already had an organic infill, they chose to stick with an all organic option. We added Safeshell to that field in December of 2016. They were very happy with the performance of these fields after the addition of Safeshell and their ability to withstand extensive use and extreme weather elements that these fields are constantly put under. So this is a testimonial from the director of operations at Brooklyn Bridge Park. I'll just read the highlighted portion here for you. They took the time to understand the unique needs of our project, provided a thorough analysis of the infill options, including an on-field mock-up of solutions. And we just wanted to share this to show that we are providing more than a one-size-fits-all solution to field design. We work hand in hand with the field owners to ensure we are solving the concerns and problems of their specific field. We'll continue south on I-95 to our next stop, which is a case study that we are very proud of at UNC Chapel Hill. So the designer of these fields designed them knowing that they were going to be in a floodplain. So we did some testing and found that the particular pad that the designer wanted to use needed at least 7 pounds of Envirofill to ensure that it would not float. So he took that recommendation, used a 1.75-inch pile turf, added 8 pounds of Envirofill to it, and built these systems. Now, for these fields, it was not a question of if they are going to flood, but when they are going to flood. Unfortunately, 6 months after these fields were installed, Hurricane Florence hit the Chapel Hill area. So we are going to go through a time lapse of photos throughout that day, and you can see how quickly the water came and then receded off these fields. So as you can see in the photos, they were completely covered by 12:45 in the afternoon. And once the rain stopped and the water had almost completely rescinded by 5 o'clock that evening. At the highest level, these fields took over 4 feet of water that day. 24 hours later, they were bone dry. and they were able to have the athletes back out there playing on these fields. These two fields are actually used for varsity lacrosse, field hockey, soccer practice, and also intramural fields for the general student body. Now, at the same time, these fields had taken on 4 feet of water and rescinded. The 2 natural grass fields next to it still had 2 feet of water left on them. So the Envirofill held in place, and it was able to keep the turf and the pad down. And we were able to hold these fields to the expectation that they were thinking when they flood. Now, we've talked about bulk density, but I wanted to show you that in practice. So on the left side here, you will see the curb next to the field, and you will also see the sticks and pine cones. Now, this photo was taken probably a month after the flood hit. Whenever we visit a field, we like to have our owner or prospective client with us. What we like to do is walk them around the edge of the field and say, hey, what are you not seeing here? And what you're not seeing is a bunch of infill on the outside of the curb. The infill stays in the field. It stays where you expect it. So you're going to get that leveled, consistent playing surface over the life of the field, regardless of how much water the field sees. Now we've got the opportunity to showcase our first case study on this tour, our first Safeshell case study on this tour, which is down in Hollandale Beach, Florida. We met with this owner in 2018. He had 2 major concerns. That was maintenance and heat. So as you can see in the before and after photos, it's a beautiful park that they completely built up. And the owner, unfortunately, had seen some fields that I mentioned earlier where the performance layer of the infill had risen up and pushed off to the sides due to those heavy Florida rains. We explained the bulk density and the specific gravity of Safeshell, which is greater than 1, and that it will not float. We took them to see a field, and he was very happy with that. And also, he wanted to make sure that field would hold up to those heavy Florida rains that can come out of nowhere. We were able to showcase that Safeshell wouldn't migrate. And then the next big question for him was heat. As you know, Florida is very hot, very damp, and very humid. Safeshell does not need water to perform, unlike many of the other organics on the market. It doesn't need to maintain a certain moisture content, and it's going to perform the same underfoot, whether it's wet or dry. So let me set the stage for you here. On this particular day, the temperature was 95 degrees outside, and there was a heavy rainstorm the night before. You can see the Safeshell on the outside of the field next to the sidewalk. The temperature is 98 degrees. And then at the highest point, the middle of the field, or the crown, where the water had drained off the most quickly, it's at 134 degrees. In this situation, the Safeshell had retained water from the rain the night before and was still keeping the surface temperature in check well into the afternoon. So what you see here is some testing done by Firefly, which is a third-party testing agency we work with, where they found in their lab under the same conditions that a crumb rubber sand system could be up into the 160-degree range. So we are significantly lowering the heat on the field. You can see the temperature reduction with dry Safeshell, but then the major benefit is when that Safeshell is fully saturated. So now we will continue westward to the great state of Texas and showcase Tatum High School field. Tatum High School was an early adopter of Envirofill. They installed a field with Envirofill in 2005, and then they reused that Envirofill in 2013. As we've talked about, Envirofill comes with a 16-year warranty. It's meant to be used in a second life cycle, and it's the only infill that goes into a field system homogenously. So in 2013, the year of replacement, Tatum High School was able to extract the infill, set it off to the side, take out their old turf, put in new turf, and then put in the Envirofill for a second life cycle. So now we're going to talk about life cycle cost. Think of the cost savings that you will have when you do not need to haul away your old infill, purchase new infill, then pay for the freight to bring in that new infill. What we are showcasing here is that Tatum High School is able to reclaim 90% of their Envirofill from life cycle 1 to life cycle 2. And as we've talked about in those tests earlier, you can see that this field, even after 8 years, is still performing very highly. This just shows you that you can expect your Envirofill system to perform the same during its second life cycle as it did on day one. I'm now going to pass it over to Kimberly Williams, who will be your tour guide for the remainder of the presentation.
Thanks, Bo. Hi, everyone. My name is Kimberly Williams. I'm the regional manager for the Pacific Northwest. I live in Los Angeles, which is home of our champions, the Lakers and the Dodgers. So we are so excited about that. But let's go ahead and we're going to leave the East Coast and head to the Best Coast. And our first stop is actually going to be in Reno. And while we might not be in Nevada, we did not gamble on the safety of this next project. So at this stop, we're going to discuss our first Safeshell installation, and it actually was not in a sports field. Have you been to the museum and seen those areas where the kids can actually get in there and play and they dig around for dinosaur bones? Well, at the Discovery Museum, Safeshell was used as a medium for the kids to dig through. Now, one question we always get about our Safeshell product is, what if my kid has a tree nut allergen? Will this affect them in any way? And actually, that was really top of mind when we brought this product to market. So if you have a nut allergy, you're actually allergic to the protein in the actual nut and not the shell. So Safeshell goes through a chemical-free process where we use heat and friction to remove any of the residual nut protein down to below a USDA food grade level. So we test each batch of Safeshell after manufacturing, and they all test below detectable limits. So basically, in plain terms, if Safeshell was food, you could serve it as an allergen-free product. So now let's head down south a little bit to San Diego, and let's look at these before and after pictures of Hilton Head Park. This project will help answer some of the questions that were sent in prior to the webinar, but one of the questions was, what information is there to help convince the school board of the benefits of a synthetic turf system? And while this isn't an actual schools field, many of the benefits will be the same. So as we look at the before and after pictures of this park, we can see that it was not well maintained and it got very little use. But here in Southern California, we have very intermittent constant drought. So watering a large field like this is financially prohibitive to impossible, and depending on the location. So also maintaining a natural grass field takes many man hours at a significant cost. So San Diego County actually reached out to us and they wanted to make this park usable again. You can see it's set up for baseball, softball in one corner, and then it has a large open area for multi-sport use. They play flag football, soccer, rugby clubs, all now use this field during various parts of the year. So by using the synthetic turf, they took a poorly maintained field, an unsafe field, and turned it into a very vibrant part of this community. And in addition to the turf, they chose Envirofill as their infill because of its low maintenance that can be used for synthetic turf systems. It's also very dense, so the infill stays in place. You're gonna have very minimal flyout and very minimal migration. And then that microban technology really helps keep the public area cleaner and safer. So again, back to the question about the benefits of an Envirofill system for a school district. At a school, you not only have the football team using the field to practice on, but many times there's other significant demands of that field, right? There's the soccer team, there's the baseball team, there's the track and field team. I mean, even the band needs a place to practice, right? So that much use would actually destroy a natural grass field, while a synthetic turf system will give you uptime 24/7. So now we're gonna head up to the coast to Washington State and take a look at a couple of projects there. And our first up is Kent Meridian High School, which is in Seattle. And here at Kent Meridian, they installed the synthetic turf for both the infield and the outfield of their baseball complex. What's really hard to see in this picture is that there's a fence along the outside edge of the field. Now, I want you guys kind of use your imagination here. So imagine there's an outfielder and a batter's up and he's swinging for the fence as always, and the ball is headed your way. So you start running, your glove is in the air, the sun is in your eyes, and then bam, you run right into that fence. Many fields today are being designed and they're using the same turf and the same infill for the entire field. But at Kent Meridian, safety was really top of mind for them. So they have a warning track on the outside edge where the turf and infill changes. So the turf is less dense, which exposes the infill, more infill. So the players get a tactical cue underfoot that lets them know where they are on the field, as well as an auditory cue because his cleats will actually sound different on the Safeshell than they do on the outfield infill. So I'm showing you here what a complete baseball system would look like using both Envirofill and Safeshell. In the infield, we recommend using a shorter turf in conjunction with Envirofill to give the infielders the predictable surface and ball response that they're used to. And then on the baseline, we use Envirofill, which makes it easy to slide without damaging the turf fibers. And then in the outfield, we use Envirofill and we can forego a pad to help reduce some of those expenses. And then finally, Safeshell and the warning track to give players those auditory and tactical cues for safety. So our ninth and final stop is actually going to be Pierce County, Washington. So here at Pierce County, we were converting a soccer and multi-purpose field as well as a baseball infield. As we talk about this project, it will also address several cost-related questions that was sent to us prior to our webinar. So aside from cost, one of the key issues here at Pierce County was that they were solving for was sustainability and ultimately reusability. They looked at a traditional sand and rubber system that had no pad that was about $1 million. They looked at an Envirofill system over pad that was $1.3 million. And then they looked at a cork and sand system that was about $1.4 million. After comparing all three, what they found was that the Envirofill system would save them over $425,000 over 3 life cycles of replacing that field. So when we think about it, there's 2 prices that you pay for the field, right? There's the price we pay today to install it, and then there's the price of ownership. And while Envirofill may be a little bit more today, it is the most cost-effective, it is the lowest maintenance infill, and it is the most sustainable and environmentally friendly infill you can use. So if you go to our website, you can actually see a video of Benjamin Barrett, who's actually the project manager for these field replacements, and he walks you through his decision-making process for these fields. So that concludes our tour of over 215 sports fields that use Envirofill and Safeshell. But before we wrap up, let's make one more stop at a natural grass field. So as the synthetic turf industry has evolved, the gold standard has become how close can we get a synthetic field to play like a natural field? We all know that athletes want to play on a natural field versus synthetic, but it's not the reality, right? So here we're going to look at a natural field against Envirofill, Safeshell, and a sand and rubber system. So the testing numbers for the natural field come in a highly maintained professional field at a stadium that you would all recognize. So money was no object for this particular natural field. They have the best of the best. Bo kind of already went over some of the definitions of the test, so we'll just look at the numbers. So in the gray bar at the very top, you can see for the natural grass field, it was a 74 for Gmax, 38 rotational resistance, 8.7 for the vertical deformation, 25 for energy restitution, and then 526 for hit. And as we look at the Envirofill and Safeshell systems, you'll notice the numbers are very close, and they're highlighted in the green there. You can see the Gmax is well within range. The rotational resistance and vertical deformation are very close. The energy restitution is what you would expect for a synthetic surface, and the HIC is also well within range. And so on the far right-hand side in the column in the blue, you can see that Envirofill is within 13% of a natural grass field as far as its performance numbers. And the Safeshell is within 17% of a premier natural field. So now let's look at the bottom in the red, the sand and rubber system. It's actually the furthest away from a natural field's performance. It has a higher Gmax for a harder surface over time. It has a higher energy restitution, which means more fatigue on the athletes, and a HIC value that is out of acceptable range. So if you're really trying to mimic the performance of a natural field, there actually are better options out there today than the old sand and rubber systems. So as I begin to wrap up right now, there are 3 takeaways that I want you to take away from today. The first is the low maintenance. Envirofill is the lowest maintenance alternative infill on the market. Safeshell is the lowest maintenance natural infill on the market. And we talked about fields at UNC that withstood severe flooding and no infill migration. We talked about fields in New York City that replaced their natural infill with Safeshell and has had no maintenance issues since. The second takeaway is of reliable performance. So both products are very consistent and they are going to provide a reliable playing experience to the athletes. With over 215 fields in the ground, we do have lots of experience and we do have lots of testing to support the claims. And lastly, you guys, risk reduction. So as we saw at the Kent Meridian with the Safeshell warning track in Hollandale, with the temperature reduction, these infills really helped provide a safer playing surface for its athletes. So we know we presented a lot of information today, but if you'd like some hard copies of the marketing materials or any testing results we've covered, you can go to our partner portal and sign up. You just go to www.usgreentech.com. If you scroll down to the bottom, you'll see the partner portal button. Just click on that, sign up, and we'll give you access. So before we go, we do have one more Q&A portion of the program, and it's just to help us better understand what you guys would like to learn more about. So please respond to this poll and let us know so we can help you moving forward. You may have to click on the poll in order to progress it. All right, so while I'm giving you guys some time to answer that question, I just want to take a moment, us and the USGreentech team, and thank you all for your interest today and your attention. But if you do have any questions, use the Q&A feature at the bottom of the screen. And Brad, I will actually turn it back over to you.
Thanks, Kim. Really excellent information, I think. I hope you all felt the same way. So, Bo, Kim, thank you for all of that. I think, you know, Kim, you had shared just a little bit of information around some takeaways, top 3 takeaways or so. But I would say another one to consider or just think a little bit about is a lot of the case studies that you heard about today all had different issues, you know, and so those owners, those designers were all seeking different solutions. And so point is, it's a very solutions driven, or should be a very solutions driven industry. And that's kind of the role that we like to play or hope that we play for our clients. You know, frankly, we feel Envirofill and Safeshell, obviously great products, but it may not be the product in every situation. So again, to Bo's point earlier, it's not a one-size-fits-all approach, and we definitely don't, you know, want to force something on someone that where we don't feel it's the right fit. So solutions-oriented, please keep that in mind. I think the UNC flood situation is a great example of that level of collaboration. Good design, good products, it all came together for an awesome project. So let's get to some of our questions. First up, what is the annual budget needed to maintain natural infill after installation over a 10-year life cycle? So it's a really good question. I'm happy to take that to get us started. Obviously, I will speak mostly to Safeshell. You know, we were developing Safeshell, hit the market 3-4 years ago. We had a certain expectation before this product, you know, entered an actual field application. We've got a lot more data now than we did back then 4 years ago. But, you know, generally speaking, it's really going to depend on a lot of factors, as you know. You know, I think from a Safeshell standpoint, material cost in this day and age, somewhere between $2,000 and $3,000 a year. There's a lot of math that backs into that. But that is really speaking to kind of a worst case top off expectation for the owners over a 10-year span. Now, again, that's based on how we thought the product would perform 3 or 4 years ago. We have additional data from New York City, for example, a really highly used field that you heard Bo talk about, and we're witnessing even less degradation than that. So I think that number would give you kind of a worst case expectation, but you know, a lot of conversation, a lot of talking points there that we could go into. So I would love to learn more about that that question if you want to hit us up offline. What is the typical infill depth for Envirofill in a 2-inch system? Bo, how about you take that one?
Absolutely. So typically we see designers, they're looking for about a 1/2 inch to a 5-inch, 5/8 inch blade reveal. So that's going to put your infill depth right at about 1.5 inches or right under 1.5 inches.
All right. Questions keep rolling in. So here, are you going to develop your own pad to go with your infill systems? We do not have intentions to do that. So I guess that's a pretty short answer there. What would be the typical time for installation of a D1 collegiate baseball field that is currently natural turf and in excellent condition? What would be the typical time for installation of a D1 collegiate baseball field that is currently natural turf and in excellent condition? Kim, do you want to take that one?
Sure. So we're not actual contractors, so we're not in the installation and building process. So I couldn't give you an honest answer on how long that would take. That really would depend on the condition of the field and the drainage and the soil, all the above. But the installation process, once the turf is laid, the infill goes in pretty quickly. Maybe a day or two, you would be able to infill your system.
Thanks, Kim. Look like we had a follow-up on that first question. So $2,000 to $3,000 per year cost over a 10-year span, approximately $30,000. So yes, with that formula, that would be approximately 20 to 30,000. Based on the 1.5 inch infill depth, how many pounds of Envirofill would that be? Bo, do you want to circle back on that one?
Absolutely. So just depending on the density of the turf, you're going to be looking at anywhere between 6.5 to 8.5, 9 pounds of Envirofill.
Yeah, a lot to be said there. Again, like really depends on the face weight. Probably going to be up in that higher range, as Bo mentioned, for a 2-inch fiber pile. Envirofill is probably better suited for an 1.5 to 1 3/4 inch system. So that could be anywhere between 6.5 to 8 pounds per square foot. Bear with us, just reading through some others. Kind of a general question around synthetic field design. How often would you have to replace a baseball-only field? Question is maybe once every 10 to 15 years. Kim, you want to take that?
Yeah, sure. So I would say it really depends on how much use that particular field is getting. I know most turf manufacturers have an 8-year warranty on the turf. So after that, your warranty would be expired as far as the turf is concerned. But a system with Envirofill, you would be able to continue to use your Envirofill with its 16-year warranty. So again, that's a subjective question, and it just depends on how much use you get out of that particular field.
Yep. We need to ensure max permeable plastic with 1/4 inch holes at 4 inches on center. Okay, it's fairly typical. Do you have a more permeable product? So yeah, in our case, I mean, we're looking at the infill profile. Our warranty has coverage around permeability through, whether it's an Envirofill or a Safeshell system, which, will far exceed anything that, a field would require. I would, just to get more clarification, maybe touch base, or we can follow up with you after the webinar to talk specifically about your project maybe. In the gold standard of a natural grass field slide, all your comparisons had a pad but the SBR system. What would the numbers look like? What are the testing numbers for SBR without a pad? Kim, since that was your slide, do you want to answer that?
Yeah, I don't have those testing numbers on hand, but is it Casey? I'm happy to share those testing numbers with you offline if you'd like, or we can send it as a follow-up. to show you what the testing numbers would look like with SBR with pad. Happy to do so.
The 16-year warranty is independent of the replacement of a turf at 8 years. Yes, so the 16-year warranty, if I understand your question correctly, the 16-year warranty is just for the Envirofill. So that would not include the turf component. Will the presentation be available to view? We can absolutely share the presentation with you after today. Absolutely.
Brad, there's a question here if Safeshell needs and Envirofill need water to cool. So I can answer that if you'd like.
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, so the Envirofill does not need water in order for it to be cool. It's going to be naturally roughly 20 degrees cooler when compared to a crumb rubber system. But as far as the Safeshell, you can get that evaporative cooling effect when the product is saturated. However, it does not need water in order for it to perform. So on the days where the weather is already cooler, you can use the Safeshell. You don't have to saturate it. You don't have to keep it watered, and it will perform at its highest performance. But again, on the summer days when it's hot, you can go ahead and saturate it and get that roughly around a 4-degree temperature reduction on that field.
Yeah, it's a great point, Ken. That is definitely a distinction there with Safeshell, and that you do not require water to have it perform optimally. All right, that looks like that answered all the questions. I'm sure there may be some follow-up. And speaking of follow-up, we look forward to that. So over the next couple of weeks, don't be surprised if you hear from one of us just to get you additional information, copy of the presentation, information to share with colleagues, so on and so forth. So again, on behalf of the team, thank you so much for joining. You can see our contact information there on the screen. Thank you so much for joining today. Make it a great week, and we will see everyone soon.